Ladies and gentlemen, this is internet personality Vangelus here with a review of Drift from Transformers Generations. This was provided to me by RiderIon, also known as Rider Pathos, also known as the man of the goddamn awesome giveaways. Drift is a beloved original comic book character, surrounded by several hundred times the controversy that his scant amount of fiction warrants. His greatest crime is apparently deflecting a lot of Mary Sue accusations that ought to be thrown at IDW's Spike, and what that version of Spike did to a Constructicon. But that aside, Drift's alt mode is that of a sports car. He's got some kanji on the side, he's got red stripes. The clear windshields are quite helpful to his look, although they do clash with the rear windshield being painted on. Painted hubcaps, clear headlights, it all does a lot to help out the fact that he's otherwise a really white car. He's also sized quite nicely for Classics or Universe counterpart figures, as you can see when you put him next to another white and red car, red alert. So Drift does accomplish something that his comic book counterpart was supposed to accomplish as well, which is to blend in with the beloved cast of characters that we all know and love. But how does he transform? Drift takes the simpler concept of the classic car-robot transformation and adds a few unique tweaks to the process. After fiddling with the doors and stored a giant sword, everything is easy and intuitive. His legs have very precise cuts that form into his Japanese aesthetic design with little effort. By folding in the windows, the doors very effectively become combat accoutrements, and not simply hanging alt-mode pieces. Several subtle swivels take a simple arm conversion and add detail reveals and slightly broader shoulders. The process hits a nice balance of simplicity and finesse. Ah yes, the figure that even had Shane McCarthy out toy hunting. Drift is very evocative of his IDW Comics design, and has the look of a robotic Ronin, with some really big armor on his shoulders and shins. What's also interesting to note is that the chest of the Cybertronian Drift is somewhat present in the sculpting underneath the windshield that forms his chest. That's a really cool bit of detail. Thanks to Gogdog for telling me about that one. His predominantly white color scheme makes those parts of him feel a little bit washed out despite the sculpted detail. But the dark gray has almost an opposite effect. Despite being mostly unpainted, it makes the sculpting stand out. It adds its own highlighting and shading. I've also got to give Drift some major bonus points for actually making silver on white work on his face. That's a very hard color scheme to pull off. His Poseability opens with a surprising addition to his neck joint. Aside from a simple swivel, it can also look up and down due to a hinge and not a ball. Now, the downward motion is generally limited, mostly because of the size of his chin, but he can look up really well. But it's his arms that are the true pleasure to pose, as they have many intermingling joints to allow for a wide range of motion. The double-jointed elbow is just gorgeous, and the wrist is on a ball that's free enough to move inwards as well, not for the transformation, but to help him double hand-wield some of his accessories. This is a well-done arm, hindered only slightly by the fact that his shoulder things are just enormous enough to start bumping into things up here. But he's got no waist joint, and I think that was really necessary. It's easily my biggest problem with his Poseability. On the bright side, he does have very silky tight joints on these sheaths, and that helps keep them out of the way in posing. They can assume any kind of helpful position to not bump into all kinds of stuff when you want to have him look like he's running or sitting or etc. So that is a good side. I just really wish he had something in his waist. There's really nothing inherently wrong with his legs. He's got a ball-jointed hip, he's got a thigh swivel, he's got knees that bend more or less 90 degrees. I think it's just the fact that he has such long shins that the knee bend doesn't immediately accomplish a lot in some poses, and he also has no ankle movement despite having a lot of moving parts down here. A lot of people have had problems with this, mostly because when he stands with his legs apart, it means he's balancing on the edges of the insides of his boots. Thing is that that's actually what a lot of toys were like up until recently, when in-tilting angles went from being a cool bonus to being expected. So I don't really hold it against him that his legs can't stay flat-footed, because I still don't think of it as an expectation, although I do love that kind of Poseability. This thing, though, is a little bit loose, and I wish it clipped into place somehow. It does help you if you're trying to get him into really weird poses and you don't mind the gap. You can fold this thing out a little bit and position it where you need to, but his legs are one of the weaker parts of his Poseability, but definitely not as bad as some have told me. Also extremely helpful to his posability is the fact that the holster for the Drifto no Swordo is on a kind of double-jointed skeletal thing here, which allows you to position it in a way where you can't really turn it left or right, which is what I really would have wanted, but you can keep it out of the way a lot better than one might expect, given that this thing is stuck on his back and about as tall as he is. The ultimate victory of his posability, though, is that it allows him to actually reach around and pull out swords from the sheaths located on the various parts of his body. Well, when he holds on to them, at least. These swords have got him a little bit of heat, though. I mean, like, a lot of people tend to say, swords are cool, but when you have 3, you're trying a bit too hard, and, well, it really depends on your perspective.
So I said he was fabulous.
That's great.
Hey, guys.
What an oversized sword!
That Mary Sue is compensating for something.
Oh, man. I just can't get along with anybody. Oh, wow! Optimus Prime! Optimus, great leader, can you help me learn how to socialize?
Get away from me! Being around a foreign toy like you will only highlight how short I am. You know your place, so get back to your corner and leave me alone.
But all right. This is unfair. I'm not even from Japan.
Pull yourself together, friend.
What? Who? Oh. Hi, guys.
Come now, Drifto-kun. I can misete that your fighting Chikara is not Genki. Sambo Ike!
In the sheaths at his sides, Drift carries a pair of short, chopping blades. Despite being made of a malleable plastic, the blades bear a really nice silver paint job. And when I say malleable, I mean like this kind of malleable. On the bright side, they seem to bend back into place really fast, and worst case, keeping them inside the sheaths will straighten them up. But when true evil strikes, and justice must be meted out at its maximum potential, Drift will draw forth the sword, whose very etching states that it will stand above all others, at least I think that's what the kanji says, and wield that which some have come to know with respect and some have come to know with fear, as the Drifto no Swordo. While the sword has actually been off-putting to some, it is also the draw for others. But I will tell you right now, it is like a noodle. It's not as bad as Bludgeon's sword, but it is a little bit scary sometimes when it gets caught on something while it's stored in the back and then it has a hideous bend in it, but I've found it generally can bounce back from that quite well. And once again, to illustrate that multi-jointedness of his arms coming into play, thanks to all those joints, he can actually hold this sword with 2 hands and make it look good. And that is one of the greatest victories of this toy on a design level. Thanks to the combination of his intense arm posability and all his different weapons, and the fact that their sheathing mechanisms are very good at staying out of the way, Drift is a highly playable toy despite not having any waist joint or deeply robust articulation in his legs. So if you can set aside any reservations you may have over what's been printed in ink, Drift is a solid Generations Deluxe, and well worth picking up at retail. This has been Internet Personality Vangelus. And if you think Drift was overpowered or has too many swords or something, let me tell you all about my original character. She's a half-dragon, half-human who was born to a dragon princess and a human carpenter, who both died before she was born. So that tragedy marks her life and gives her character. But her great empathy and happiness lets her solve any problem she faces, as well as the problems of all those that she encounters. She's got 1 blue eye and 1 green eye, as well as a glowing yellow eye that opens up on her forehead when she's thinking or using her magic psychic powers. And when the boys aren't staring at her magnificent and gorgeous flaxen blue hair, she's either playing one of the 50 musical instruments she's an expert at, or writing her 17th novel. Yeah, my original character is probably the best one you've ever seen. That's why I'm the king role player. KRP, that's what the ladies like to call me. Especially the ones who are played by guys.